Around here, being called a freak is actually a term of endearment, and today we are breaking down the third annual Freaks List with Andrew Ivins, and this year got some of the best stories. Plus, whether it's through the portal or good old-fashioned high school recruiting, Lincoln Riley has an unreal history of coaching elite quarterbacks. But the future may be even brighter. We have all the intel ahead of some big commitments this weekend, coaching advice, high school highlights, and the kickoff to the college football season. All that and more as a loaded college football recruiting show starts right now. He's back alongside Blair Angulo. I am Emily Proud. A reminder to submit questions in the chat. The only way you can be a part of it is by subscribing to the 24/7 Sports YouTube channel. Also, hit that like button so we know that you're watching. Blair, so glad to have you back on the show. I know you've been battling some weather out west. How are things now?
Doing well. I'm excited to talk recruiting finally with you after the scare that we had down here in Southern California. The first tropical storm in over 80 years. We don't even know what to do with rain, let alone hurricanes.
Hurricanes, yeah. Learned a new term this week, but no, Cooper did a great job filling in for you, but don't worry. You're not going to get Wally pipped here. We're glad to have you back. Let's go ahead and break down some of those headlines. The Freaks List is out. And in a bit, we're going to talk a little bit more about what it is and who else is on it with the creator of the list. That's 24/7 Sports Director of Scouting, Andrew Ivins. But Blair, Clemson linebacker commit Sammy Brown is number one. In your eyes, why is he the freakiest member of the 2024 class?
It's got to be the weight room domination by Sammy Brown. He is super impressive in there. Then you tack on the back-to-back state championships as a wrestler, as well as the 10-7 100-meter time at 230 pounds. How do you spell Sammy? F-R-E-A-K.
I love it. We'll tell you some of the most unique stories on this list a little bit later in the show. But first, USC landed a commitment from the number one player in the 2026 class. That is quarterback Julian Lewis. Now, he is just a sophomore, but who wouldn't want to play for a guy who has coached 3 Heisman Trophy winners? Blair, why does Lewis fit so well for the Trojans?
Stylistically, it's a great fit for both USC and for Lewis. He can make all the throws. He's athletic in the pocket. He's mobile. He's accurate. And from a timing perspective, it's also a fit. Some might wonder and question whether this is too early. But if Lincoln Riley is happy taking a 2026 quarterback right now, then USC fans should be over the moon.
Yeah, there could be a chance that he might suit up for USC a year early. Our expert will answer that question a little bit later on. But speaking of number ones, the top-ranked JUCO player in the 2024 class announcing a top 3. Sione Laulea has narrowed it down to Miami, Oregon, and USC. He told our Brandon Huffman that he plans to make a decision in October and then enroll in January. But what kind of player could one of these programs land?
A long and rangy defensive back. He does a really good job of sticking to receivers in and out of their breaks. And then he shows great awareness at the catch point. You see it there on the film. This is a player who's really comfortable on an island playing one-on-one. And with him being a junior college player, there won't be much seasoning needed. He could help one of these 3 schools as early as next fall.
Looking forward to finding out where he lands. Meanwhile, on Tuesday, 2024 5-star defensive lineman Eddrick Houston committed to Ohio State. Now, you watched it go down right here on the 24/7 Sports YouTube channel, also known as #CommitHQ. But Blair, what does he add to Ohio State's second-ranked class?
An explosive interior defensive lineman. He plays with great effort and great pad level. Our scouting department loves his initial get-off and ability to use his hands. He's very violent in there in the trenches, and the Buckeyes are getting a pillar up front.
It's time now for the Wiltfong Whip Around with our Director of Recruiting, Steve Wiltfong, here in studio. Steve, it was just a couple days ago that we were in these exact chairs watching 5-star defensive lineman Eddrick Houston pick Ohio State. Now that he's in the fold, what does he add to that defensive line room?
Well, Buckeyes have the nation's number 2 recruiting class right now, Emily, and this is one of the most versatile, ferocious defensive linemen in the country. 270 pounds, can play across the front, but Ohio State, they're going to use him as a big defensive end. He's a relentless, high-motor football player that's really good with his hands, fantastic wrestler, runs track in the spring. and is just a guy that makes all the hustle plays. So really big pickup for Ohio State as they add him to 5-star defensive lineman Justin Scott. They have 4 5-stars in the fold right now, including the 2 receivers, Jeremiah Smith and Mylan Graham.
Pretty impressive. That's good for the number 2 class in the nation. 22 total commitments in this class, so probably not too many new additions, but what should we be aware of coming down the block for Ryan Day and his staff?
Well, I think they could take up to 4 more guys in this class here, and there's 2 guys that are obvious that they would love to have right now, and they're both offensive linemen. You have 5-star offensive tackle, the number 1 player in the country at his position in our rankings, Brandon Baker, and I think he's closing in on a college decision. I think he'll make one early in the fall, and I have Ohio State near the top of his list. I think them and Texas are the programs that are in great position at this point in this process. Now, I said on Whip Around in the recruiting show earlier this week that I would maybe give the edge to Texas right now, but he has a fantastic relationship with Justin Fry. He's absolutely loved his experiences in Columbus, and Ohio State should not be discounted as he continues to dot I's and cross T's with this process. He has a big official visit coming up with Nebraska. They're a program potentially rising with him. And then Oregon, you never discount the Ducks, Emily, as you know. And if they're a hat on the table, there's been times where we've liked Oregon's position with Brandon Baker. And then you have Jordan Seaton, the number 3 interior offensive lineman in the 24/7 Sports player rankings out of IMG Academy, East Coast native. There was a time where I loved Ohio State's position. I even had a crystal ball forecast in favor of the Buckeyes for Jordan Seaton. But at one point, it looked like both parties were going their different ways. Well, they've rekindled the old magic. I think Ohio State is on the short list for Jordan Seaton. He's obviously got high interest in Alabama, had a phenomenal official visit there in the summer. You have Florida in the mix. Oklahoma is certainly in there. South Carolina. Ohio State, I think that he's going to get back for an official visit at some point. And, we'll see if they can get back to the top of the mountain with Jordan Seaton. And then I think as far as the other 2 positions, I think that they would love to add another pass rusher, another defensive lineman, and then another safety. And those are guys that we could see them evaluate on senior film, or we could see them get that spatula out as the season goes, because these teams got to play games. So you might feel good about your commitments now. If you lose a few games and the Buckeyes are hot, they may be coming with that spatula.
That's the thing. We got so many guys committed already, especially 5-stars. We're about to see another one happen this weekend with the number 3 player in the state of Florida, and that is the 5-star defensive lineman David Stone, set to announce on Saturday. So we've got Oklahoma, Michigan State, and Miami look to be the favorites. But what are you hearing just a few days out?
Yeah, and we talked about him on Monday too, but this is the hottest name in the country right now, going into his announcement and talking to his mom on Wednesday morning and talking to sources with knowledge of the recruitment on Wednesday. Look, Oklahoma, they've always felt good. He's an Oklahoma native. He's been to campus numerous times. His sister goes to school there. They love Brent Venables. They love Todd Bates. They love the trajectory of the program. But I'm telling you right now, nobody should be surprised if this young man picks Miami on Saturday. His family loves it in Coral Gables. His mom loves that he was able to go to IMG Academy and kind of spread his wings down there and become a man. And the state of Florida has been good to him. This is a young man that wants to be a doctor. They like what Miami offers in that capacity. The smaller class sizes at Miami is another thing that's attractive. And then there's no program recruiting him harder right now. There's no program in touch with him and his family more than Mario Cristobal and company. And so the crystal ball's on Oklahoma. It's been that way for like 2 years now. But I'm telling you here, as we hit the home stretch, and Michigan State's in there, but Miami, it could very much land David Stone here going into his announcement this weekend.
Love when we have no idea what's going to happen. It adds to the intrigue for sure. We got another commitment on Saturday, the top uncommitted safety in the 2024 class, 4-star Zaquan Patterson. It's looking like, Auburn, Florida State, Miami, and Michigan, maybe the front runners in this commitment. What are you hearing a few days out?
Yeah, and Ohio State trying to hang around, but we would have mentioned him in that first segment. Yeah, look, I think that Florida State is the program right now that I think is best positioned a few days before he announces his college decision. But this is a young man that loves Auburn, loves Coach Zach Etheridge, loves what Coach Hugh Freeze and company are building, and there's some confidence around the Plains that they'll ultimately land Zaquan Patterson in Michigan. 2 summer visits to Ann Arbor, has a great relationship with Coach Klink, certainly loves what he's seen on the field with that defense, with those defensive backs, with their player development. He was there for the barbecue at the Big House, so I think Michigan's near the top of his list as well. And obviously Miami's doing everything they can to keep him home, and they've been pushing for Zaquan Patterson as long as anybody. But Florida State got great relationships at the school. Coach Mike Norvell and company are real hot right now, and I think that Zaquan Patterson is feeling Florida State as well.
Okay, we'll see what happens with him. Another 4-star, Grant Brix. He's one of the highest-rated uncommitted offensive tackles, which is a very prime position. A lot of people want a piece of that in the 2024 class. Some interested parties include the likes of Kansas State, Nebraska, Oklahoma, Alabama. There's a lot more involved in this recruitment. What's the latest when it comes to both his timeline and the ongoing recruitment?
Well, I think as far as timeline goes, anytime now. I think I'm expecting this young man to make a college decision this week at some point. And when I look at those finalists that you named, the programs that I think are in the best shape for him are Nebraska and Oklahoma. I think with Nebraska, the excitement around Matt Rule and that new coaching staff, the opportunity to play very close to home, those are a couple things that have Nebraska in a really good position for him. And then Oklahoma, there might not be a better offensive line coach in the country than Bill Bedenbaugh. He's got a great relationship with Grant and his family. He's loved his experiences in Norman. And again, program trajectory, the way Oklahoma is recruiting, what they've been, what they're capable of. I think those are all things that excite Grant Brix. And this is a young man that's extremely touted because he's a tough, physical football player that can bend, plays with great leverage at the point of attack. He's a fantastic wrestler. When you talk about what Matt Rule is trying to build at Nebraska and what Brent Venables is trying to build at Oklahoma, they're looking for guys' culture. Grant Brix fits that culture that both those programs are trying to have.
Both those programs would really love to land his services. Steve, you know what I'd love to do? I don't know if we've done before. Ask for likes in person. Look, we got the double thumbs up from Steve. We got a little dance going too. I love it. Come on, if you have not hit the like button after seeing that, what are you doing?
And subscribe.
And subscribe. And as a reminder, the only way you can be a part of the chat is if you are subscribed. And the chat has some questions for you right now, so let's throw some out. This one's coming from Tyler, saying, Steve, what's the latest on 4-star athlete Daniel Hill out of Mississippi after pushing back his commitment date?
Well, obviously, we thought for a while that he was going to commit on Wednesday. He did not announce his college decision on Wednesday. And we've liked South Carolina for quite some time for Daniel Hill. And as you see right here, this is a young man that can catch the football, but he's also ferocious between the tackles, over 200 pounds, state champion in the highs and the lows, multiple position capability with this young man. South Carolina, there might not be a position player or an offensive player that's higher on their board than Daniel Hill. They recruited him as such, and I thought for a while that's where he would ultimately end up, but with him delaying his decision makes things more exciting. He's been to Alabama quite a bit. Nick Saban and the Crimson Tide have had him in Tuscaloosa a bunch. Their running back pedigree, the program standard, Coach Gillespie and company. If Daniel Hill ended up at Alabama, I certainly would not be surprised here with him delaying his decision. And look, there's a third program that's really been trying to make a move with Daniel Hill for a long time. That's the Tennessee Vols. They've gotten him to campus a couple times, and they're trying to hang around in this recruitment as well. So with him delaying his decision, I would say I thought South Carolina coming into Wednesday, so now it leaves it more up in the air, right?
The little SEC battle going on for Daniel Hill services. This next one is from Chris. I love it. He wants to know, while you're in Nashville, are you checking out any of the Tennessee talent? We know that you're here just to see us at 24/7 Sports headquarters, but you have some other things you're doing while you're here, right?
Well, you guys have kind of become a quarterback hotbed down here. Coach Riley and those guys doing a good job developing quarterbacks around here in this area. I have 2 visits locked in. Jared Curtis, Nashville Christian Academy quarterback, our number 2 player in the 2026 player rankings. Went over to see him on Wednesday, and he's obviously a fantastic talent that's already being courted by the best schools in the nation: Alabama, Georgia, Florida State, Ohio State, South Carolina, some of the programs that he's high on. And then very early this morning, like when I say early, before 6 a.m. early, George McIntyre and his Brentwood Academy teammates beat the heat, get out there and work out at 5:40 in the morning. Number 2 quarterback in the 2025 player rankings. I think this is an SEC battle, Emily. You got Alabama There's some people that think he'll ultimately end up at Alabama, but I know he's also very high on LSU. Very excited about this Tennessee program. He can just feel the energy around Knoxville and this rising program and the fan support that they have in state. And he's also keeping an eye on Michigan. I think he's going to be tough to get out of SEC country.
Yeah, when you grow up in this area, it's just tough to leave that highly coveted SEC country. Steve, so glad that you were here in studio. I'm glad we were able to get this segment done in person because it's such a treat. And he gave us a nice little taste of some of the information that he's gathering while he's down here. But of course, this is where you can read the rest of Steve's work on 247sports.com. And as always, for that really good, exclusive, juicy information, become a VIP member today. The annual Freaks List is out, and we have so much to talk about. Let's welcome in the man behind the list, 247 Sports Director of Scouting, Andrew Ivins. Andrew, before we dive in, first, kind of just explain to us what the Freaks List is and why it's become an annual tradition.
Well, I mean, it's a play on what Bruce Feldman does, and he has done it for over a decade with all of the college players. And he goes around and collects information and trying to find guys inside college football programs that are a little bit different than others. We're doing the same thing here with the high school list, right? We're looking for guys that are multi-sport athletes, right? Workout warriors, guys that can dunk the basketball, guys that are moving iron in the weight room, just something that separates them from the rest of the pack. And, when I put this list together, the names are super long, and then you start getting into it, and you got to make some cuts. It's not easy. It's not an easy thing to do. Lean heavily on verified information and just my personal in-person evaluations. The idea is to find 50 guys that are just different than the rest of the class, and I think we accomplished that here in 2024, and this is probably the best I have felt about the list in year 3 of this exercise.
Well, if we're looking for guys that are just a little bit different, I mean, look no further than the number 1 player on this list, Sammy Brown. We know the havoc that he causes on the field, but what is it about him as an athlete overall that makes him the number 1 freak?
Well, Emily, when I polled different college staffs around the country asking, hey, who do you guys think the number 1 freak is in the class of 2024, Sammy Brown's name came up time and time again. And for me, he is someone that I circled about 2 years ago when he was power cleaning 265 pounds. He is now power cleaned 405 pounds. I'm a guy with an Olympic weightlifting background. And when you watch Sammy Brown, it is perfect form. It is perfect technique. So that is freaky what he's able to do in the weight room, in the squat rack. And then you start looking at the track and field profile, 10.7 in the 100-meter dash, and the big one, 23.3 in the long jump. For someone that is 230 pounds, that is a bit unheard of. Tracking football, our friends there, they do a PAI score, which takes into account a prospect's weight, their height, their speed, the track and field data numbers. And Sammy Brown scored a 5.0 for them. It's extremely rare to find. So Sammy's just different. I forgot to include, he's got 2 state titles on the wrestling mat. He's 88-5 as a wrestler. So it goes on and on. He is the reason why we created these lists. He is one of one.
Andrew, we're finding out a lot about you. Oysters, we know you're a tight end guy. You've got an Olympic weightlifting background. I mean, what can't you do? Jeremiah Smith is at number 2. He's the Ohio State wide receiver commit. He's a part of a really loaded wide receiver group. 5 of your top 15 freaks are wide receivers. As we look back to the last few classes, Andrew, what makes this 2024 group so freaky?
They're guys that can do a little bit of everything. We're talking about big frames. We're talking about guys that have verified speed. I mean, we knew, I guess, coming into this exercise, right, into assembling the Freaks list, that the 2024 group of wide receivers was really, really good. I mean, look where they are ranked in our normal rankings. We had a bunch of guys in 5-star range. And then when you put together this exercise, you start like figuring out that, hey, most of these guys are also basketball players. Cam Coleman is definitely someone I want to highlight, the Texas A&M commit. He took an official visit to Clemson that first weekend of June, and I guess an impromptu dunk contest broke out at Dabo Sweeney's house. I don't know if they crowned a winner, but it would be hard for someone to beat Cam Coleman. He was doing a variety of different acrobatic moves in the air and finishing with authority at the rim. I think you can look at a guy like Jelani Watkins as well that's headed to LSU. He's also going to run track for the Tigers. Texas State champ in the 100, the 200. So it's just a broad, wide-ranging group. And I think the other thing is, you know, with where football is, with the NFL, it's such a passing league. College is as well. Some of the best athletes are being pushed out towards the perimeter, and you're trying to find guys that can, number one, go get the football, right? And then number two, run after the catch. And I think basketball is important there, certainly with track and field when you study the 2023 NFL drafts. And so it's not surprising to me that so many of these guys are pass catchers.
Yeah, currently 8 5-star receivers, so certainly a lot of talent in this class. Blair, you said it. He's our tight end, guys. We got to ask about the number 3 player, Nebraska tight end commit Carter Nelson. He plays 8-man football in a small town in Nebraska. We love this story, but man, there's nothing small about this guy. What makes the number 1 tight end a top 3 freak?
An SEC coach I trust told me a few months ago, freak. That was the text message I got about Carter Nelson. He's a multi-sport athlete. Yes, and Emily, he plays 8-man football. Not a lot of people have seen it. It's certainly an interesting watch when you're going through all of the huddle. He lives in a town in Nebraska that has no stoplights. I had to verify that. Someone had told me there was no stoplights. I was on Google Maps just to make sure. But he is the pride of the town. He's going to be the biggest thing that has ever came out of Ainsworth, Nebraska. His dad was a track and field coach, and Carter Nelson would go to practices as a young kid, and he kind of just was born into it. It's the same thing with Sammy Brown. You know, his weightlifting, his dad was a strength coach when he was growing up. Carter Nelson, he went 7 foot in the high jump. For a guy that is 6'4", 215 pounds, that is unheard of, right? We have not found anyone else that has done that. When he did it, he tied a Nebraska 30-year record. He's also gone 11:05 in the 100-meter dash, 14:1 in the pole vault. And then when you put on the basketball highlights, I mean, that might be his best sport. Dad said he was initially getting recruited a little bit for hoops, but he's a guy that likes to pass the ball. So, college basketball programs really didn't pursue him. But the thing is, with 8-man football, you got to be a ball hog. And Carter Nelson scored 40 total touchdowns last year using a combination of his arm, his legs, in his hands. This guy was built for Matt Rule, right? We call it LinkedIn there, Trade City. I can't wait to see what the Cornhusker is going to be able to do with Carter Nelson. And one final nugget. Dad told me that Carter Nelson can drive the golf ball 300-plus yards straight. I thought that was kind of crazy as well.
Wow, no stoplights. That's I gotta get to that city down there in Nebraska. No tickets either, I'm sure. Andrew, let's move down the list a little bit further into the 20s, where there are 3 running backs that are headed to Georgia. Nate Frazier, Chauncey Bowens, and Dwight Phillips Jr. They are 3 running backs that right now are super freaky, right? What makes them as a trio so freaky to look at, and what are they going to bring to Athens once they get there?
Well, they're all fast, and they all kind of complement each other. So far in this 2024 cycle, the story of Georgia's number 1 ranked recruiting class has been kind of Dylan Raiola, and then that 6-man offensive line haul. Well, these 3 running backs, I mean, they are dudes. All 3 of them are sub-11 guys in the 100-meter dash. Dwight Phillips Jr., his dad, Dwight Phillips, won a gold medal in the long jump at the Olympics back in 2004 in Athens. Funny Dwight Phillips is headed to play Athens, Georgia to play football. He's got the speed, 4.28 out of Georgia summer camp a few years ago. UC Report, which is a database that all the Power 5 schools use. They have him as one of the fastest max verified speeds at over 22 miles per hour. They call him Lightning, right? Chauncey Bowens, I think he is the Thunder, a little bit different of a running back, 5'11", 225 pounds. This guy is rocked up, can move a ton of weight in that weight room. Told me he front squats 500 pounds twice. I think that is super impressive. Again, just a guy with a weightlifting background. That front squat requires some technique. It requires some flexibility. You go on his social media page, it is deadlift after deadlift for him. And Chauncey Bowens, kind of a unique combination of different sports. He runs track, obviously, and then he plays soccer and lacrosse. Final one, Nate Frazier. I wasn't going to have him in there, but Greg Biggins, our guy in the West Coast, is like, you got to put Nate Frazier in there. And then he got me some data. Nate Frazier, 5'11", 205 pounds. He's got 4.9% body fat, which is super low. He bench pressed 225 pounds over 20 times, back squatted 300 pounds over 13 times. So he too is a gym rat, and he can run. He's 10.58 in the 100-meter dash. I think he's kind of complements in a combination of Dwight Phillips and Chauncey Bowens. But the bottom line is Georgia is restocking that running back room. They're going to have no shortage of options. And then they got the heaviest offensive line class like in the past decade that's going to be blocking for them. So Georgia, they just keep humming along, the two-time defending national champions on the recruiting trail.
Yeah, this list is just littered with future dogs. It is nuts. So you mentioned some on the offensive side of the ball. I got to ask real quick about one on the defensive side of the ball. Ellis Robinson. He's the number 1 cornerback, but what landed him as number 14 on this list?
So I've done this list for 3 years, right? Every year I ask the guys at IMG, and I know a bunch of different staff members there, like, who's the guy that needs to be on it, right? 2 years ago, it was Tyler Booker, who's going to start on the offensive line for Alabama. Tons of NFL draft buzz. This past year, Francis Mauigoa, who's going to start as a true freshman at Miami. He made Bruce Feldman's Freaks list. That was awesome to see. I had him number 2 in 2022. Bruce Feldman had him number 5 in this list that he just put out. And then when I asked this year, they said Ellis Robinson. One contact told me, hey, potentially the best cornerback that has ever come through IMG. That is high praise because they have sent a ton of DBs to the NFL, Greg Newsom being one of them. But Ellis Robinson, 4.5 in the 40-yard dash. There's a 35-inch arm measurement floating around out there. And I think kind of the X factor in what people don't realize about Ellis Robinson is he's super tough. Last year, he tweaked his knee. He could have very well shut it down. All the top schools were recruiting him, but he gutted it out. And then against St. Francis Academy late in the season, had a key interception and a takeaway as IMG upset the Panthers. So Ellis Robinson, a box checker in a variety of different ways.
Okay, so in total, there are 50 freaks on this list. All of them have unique stories and a unique set of skills. We know you're doing the research on these stories. In fact, you're going on Google Maps to see if there are spotlights in towns. We know you know the stories. So what's a cool one that maybe you've heard among this group?
Whit Edwards, he is a cowboy. Whit Edwards grew up rodeoing, and I do not know much about rodeo, so I had to do a ton of research on that. I've seen a few episodes of Yellowstone, but I didn't know like a ton about bull riding and roping and whatnot. But that's what Whit Edwards did. He grew up on a farm in Oklahoma before he really turned his focus to football. And Whit Edwards, I asked him, like, do you win trophies? No. In rodeoing, you win buckles and saddles. And he had a bunch of them, but he has since turned his attention to football, and his stock is rising. He is 6'5", 200 pounds. Some schools like him as a pass rusher. Other schools like him as a move tight end. Vanderbilt brought him in for an official visit. Texas A&M just offered. TCU just offered. He's super unique. So bull riding, rodeoing, you got to be coordinated, you got to be balanced, and that's not the only reason he's on here. He's a guy that finished, I think, 3rd at the state meet in wrestling, and he anchored a 4x100 team that qualified for state. So he's just different than all the others.
And if you're willing to get on top of a bull, I want you on my football team. That says enough. Hey, if you love the Freaks List, go ahead and hit that like button to show Andrew the love. Andrew, thank you for being on the show. If you want a more in-depth look at this list, you can check out the latest episode of the 24/7 Sports Football Recruiting Podcast. New episodes drop every Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday. You can find them wherever you get your podcasts.
Another talented arm is headed to Los Angeles as 2026 quarterback Julian Lewis announced his commitment to the USC Trojans earlier this week. Caleb Williams is aiming for consecutive Heisman trophies and a first appearance in the college football playoff. The depth chart heading into this weekend also features former 4-star Miller Moss and former 5-star Malachi Nelson. We brought on our own 5-star to break it all down, Chris Trevino of USCFootball.com. Chris, we mentioned the hurricane at the top of the show. And, you know, in terms of people here in Los Angeles, I think you could say that Julian Lewis drew just as many headlines. When you look ahead to the future, when Caleb Williams is off this roster, where does Julian Lewis fit in Lincoln Riley's quarterback room?
Look, it's very hard to predict what a quarterback room is going to look like in the age of NIL and the transfer portal. But I can tell you that Julian Lewis is going to walk onto campus, whenever that is, and he's going to be a threat to play early for Lincoln Riley. As we know, Lincoln Riley values the talent in that room, and he's going to be able to put him on the field if he wants to. We saw that with Caleb Williams in his freshman season. So Malachi Nelson, Miller Moss, those guys are expected to compete for that starting job next season. But hey, Julian Lewis could be competing against Malachi Nelson for that starting job when he arrives on campus. But I can tell you what, Lincoln Riley is going to build the most competitive QB room that he can make. So if that means he's got to go into the transfer portal this offseason for 2024, he's going to do it. Julian Lewis will be walking into a lion's den of a quarterback room, whoever is in there. But Julian Lewis is also a Lion himself. So he is a threat to play as a freshman.
All right, so looking at that quarterback room, though, USC doesn't have a QB committed this current cycle, and with Julian Lewis now in the fold for 2026, you would assume it makes it that much more difficult to land a passer in the 25 class. So we got to know, I mean, how likely is maybe a reclassification for Lewis to the 2025 class?
That is obviously the big question right now, and it's something that's going to circle him for the next several months. If I was a betting man, I would say that is going to happen. It just feels like it's set up for that. I mean, a couple of the signs that have pointed to that is they have not offered a QB in 2025. They've hosted a couple guys, brought them on campus, but they have not pulled the trigger on offering someone in 2025. So there's a big hole for them to say, hey, we have an open spot. Come be our 2025 quarterback. And the other sign is they actually offered another 2026 quarterback, which I found very interesting. They did it back in April. Helaman Kasuga out of Utah, ranked in our top 100 for the 2026, a very good quarterback prospect. But they offered him well into recruiting Julian Lewis and where they felt really good about Julian Lewis. So that was a really interesting offer to me and told me like, hey, something might be brewing here where they're just going to move Julian Lewis to 2025. Kasuga in 2026, and let's move on from there. So again, if I was a betting man, I would say yes, I think it's going to happen, but that's something Julian Lewis is going to have to make the decision on his own.
Lincoln Riley has recruited and coached the likes of Baker Mayfield and Jalen Hurts and Kyler Murray and now Caleb Williams. When you look at Julian Lewis, the quarterback, Chris, stylistically, how does he compare to those guys and how does he fit into USC's offense?
In terms of fit, the word that comes to mind is beautifully. You know, all those guys you listed are very different players, but they all have something in common in that they're very mobile. They can create, they can get out of trouble, they can create on the fly, they can keep the play alive. And that's something that Julian Lewis can do. Now, he may not be as dynamic an athlete as, say, a Caleb Williams busting off a 70-yard run down the field. Maybe that's something that will develop in his game. He doesn't have that elite athleticism, but hey, look at the tape. This kid can move, he can get out of the pocket, he can process, he can make those beautiful off-balance throws. He's so elite at that at just a freshman. So when you think of all those high-level quarterbacks Lincoln Riley's produced, the best ones and the best fit for his offense are ones that can create, get out of trouble, and make something out of nothing. And in the college game, that's so huge because negative plays kill you at the college level. And so having a guy who can get out of trouble, create on the fly, pick up yards with his feet is huge. So it's a perfect marriage for Lincoln Riley and this offense. And, you know, he is set up to be maybe the next great one that Lincoln Riley has produced. He has to keep developing, obviously, but he has all the traits that set him up to be one of those guys.
Perfect. Beautiful. I love all of these words. This is a very exciting segment for USC fans. I know it's the most important position in football, but we got to talk about the rest of the positions out there. So as USC prepares for its Big Ten future, who are some names that we should keep an eye on for upcoming classes?
Well, let's start with 2024. Just looking ahead to this weekend, shout out to Brian Doan, our 24/7 Sports national recruiter on the East Coast, got scoop, that Jalen Harvey, an edge rusher out of Maryland, who is down to Penn State, USC, and Maryland, will be coming to town this weekend for a last-second unofficial for the San Jose State game. And this is a guy USC felt very confident for in the summer, coming off his official visit. This will be his third visit this weekend, and it shows that he means business coming across the country from Maryland to California to watch this game. So, it feels like a Penn State-USC battle right now, with Penn State maybe having the edge. But USC has felt very confident with him. And I think this one's going to come down to convincing his parents, a.k.a. his mother, to send her baby all the way across the country. So this is going to be a big visit for the family to get more comfortable with that. So we'll see how they're feeling on the sidelines. I'll be down there, so I'll be checking out for Jalen Harvey. But obviously that's a more short-term one in the 2024 class. And then another prospect for 2025.
Yep, go ahead, Chris.
That USC. Okay, sorry. I didn't know we were switching around, but Chris Cole obviously is a linebacker in 2024 that they're hosting for an official visit on September 2nd. And that's a big one because USC needs some linebacker help at that position. They missed out on some of their prospects this summer. So Chris Cole is the guy who's going to come in September 2nd for an official visit. Supposed to make his commitment September 7th. So, hey, anytime you can get the final official visit, it's a great sign. They're going to have to, make some headway against Georgia, which has the crystal ball lead. But USC will be putting all the moves on him to get him to be their linebacker in 2024. And then 2025, you have Noah McHale out of Bonita, who is a 4-star prospect in the 2025 cycle. He has been to USC more than any 2025 prospect I can think of. Every time he goes on a national visit to somewhere big, because he is a national prospect, he always makes it a point to get back to USC. USC has been building this relationship for a very long time. So it feels like this one is going to pay off very soon. He loves USC. His family loves USC. It just seems natural for the local kid to come be a Trojan and maybe make that commitment sooner rather than later. And the most telling sign for me is that he actually came out for USC's first fall practice of the year, which was at 6:30 in the morning. Imagine getting a teenager to get up in the summer to come out to watch practice at 6:30 in the morning. That's the most telling sign for me.
Yeah, and then you obviously see some of the film there. We talk a lot about quarterbacks and skill talent, but that's where USC needs the most help is on the defensive side of the ball. Noah would be a huge pickup for them in the 25 class. Chris, USC is 2 days away from kicking off year 2 of the Lincoln Riley era. It is USC versus San Jose State this Saturday night inside the Coliseum. What is the atmosphere like around the program as it gets set to make another charge towards the college football playoff?
I would say it feels like 80% pure excitement and then 20% pure anxiety and anxiousness. The season ended on such a low note that USC fans are just waiting for that opportunity to see their team back on the field and kind of silence some people on social media and doubters. And this team as well, they've heard all off season how bad their defense is. And last season, there was a lot of excitement, but it was a different kind of excitement knowing that, they're going into the Lincoln Riley era. You didn't really know what to make of the 2022 season. They kept setting new expectations as the year went on. Could this be a 9-win season? Oh, this is a 10-win season. Oh, they could go to the Pac-12 championship. Oh, maybe they're going to go to the college football playoff. They obviously came 1 win short of that, but the expectations for 2023 are drawn very clear. It's college football playoff or bust, make a run at the national title. You have Caleb Williams. You have an elite Heisman winner. You can't waste that window. And a lot of that anxiety is around their defense. It has to be better if they want to make that run, if they want to accomplish those goals for this year. So everyone is just waiting. They need to see what the defense looks like. They're just so eager to finally get it over with and see and start building and start watching some games.
I think there are a lot of fan bases out there that could say the same thing. 80% excitement, 20% anxiety. Just excited for the season to finally be here. Chris, thanks so much for breaking it all down for us. People watching out there, go ahead and hit that like button too. I think like less than half of you have hit it. We can do so much better than that, but you can't do any better. If you're looking for USC football content, then heading to uscfootball.com. They got you covered for all things football and recruiting.
Carl Reed with 24/7 Sports. That means they don't take breaks. They 24/7 around the clock.
What's good for the goose is good for the gander. You in the class of 2024, you better stop playing around and make a decision.
And I go in there with my wife, and Mike Norvell is talking to a bunch of recruits, and I thought she was going to get in the transfer portal.
If they are going to be recruiting every day, you better be working every day, and that's the real deal.
Dr. Reed is like Nate Dogg. He knows a hit when he's spinning.
It's time now to read between the lines with National College Football analyst, the coach, Carl Reed. You gave a lot of great advice in that little reel right there, so we're here for some more advice coming from the perspective of a high school football coach. I hope you can manage that. You have a few years. You do?
I did that a little while.
Okay, perfect, because the high school football season has officially begun. We saw the number 1 team, Mater Dei, and number 5, Buford, both just loaded with talent. We broke that down earlier this week. But when you have players with so much talent, with so many stars next to their names and all those lofty expectations, how do you manage that from a coaching perspective?
A lot of coaches and a lot of people think because you have a bunch of talent that it's easy and it must be easy to win. Sometimes, Emily, those guys can be the hardest group of kids to manage because it's not just managing them, it's managing parents, it's managing trainers, it's managing all the outside influences that they have and getting them to focus on the team. And what I always would tell my kids was this: January to July is about you. It's about your recruiting, your camps, your stars, your visits. But August to December has to be about the team. And so you have games like this and you want to play, and no matter how much talent you have, it always comes down to who can run the system the best, who can be disciplined, who can play as a unit with some chemistry. Those are the teams that win games like this. And we talk about the 4 and the 5 stars, but high school football is really funny. There's always going to be some kid in that game that we haven't talked about in recruiting at all that might be going to a smaller school that's going to make a big play that could decide the game one way or the other.
It's a team game through and through. Okay, last weekend we saw Bishop Gorman put up 63 points in a win at Corner Canyon. But they gave up 42 points and really could not do anything to contain Utah quarterback commit Isaac Wilson. We know he is special, and there's so much to learn in week 1. But how do you go about addressing your team coming off a win, but maybe one that caused some worries moving forward in the season?
There used to be an old saying that said defenses win championships. But with RPO and spread offenses and tempo, guys like Isaac Wilson are going to score some points. They're going to make some plays. You just want to get in there with your defense and make sure that run fits are right, coverages are right, correct your mistakes, but you don't beat on your guys too bad for a big-time Division I quarterback prospect scoring some points. You move on. Now, Blair, you've covered Wilson a ton, I know. Tell us a little bit about what makes his skill set so special.
I was on the sidelines there for that game last week, Carl, and he is just a really multi-dimensional quarterback. I think we think of him as this pure pocket passer who can really sling it downfield, and he puts up big numbers. You know, he scored 6 touchdowns on Friday night against Bishop Gorman, but I've been really impressed with his athleticism and his ability to escape pressure and do things on the run. He can tuck it and run, Carl, if he needs to, and take off downfield, pick up those tough yards. He had 3 rushing touchdowns near the goal line against Bishop Gorman. Those are some big boys up front that he was maneuvering past. I think he's sneaky athletic. He had the best shuttle time at the Under Armour camp in Salt Lake City, and that included some big-time defensive backs, some receivers. I mean, this is an athlete who I think knows what it takes to get his skill set and get the most out of his frame. He's about 6 feet, 180. He showed it at the Elite 11 finals where, you know, in some of those drills, the arm talent is there. He just needs to kind of refine things. But from a game breaker standpoint, from a playmaking standpoint, I think Bishop Gorman was surprised. They were caught off guard because they just saw him last fall in Vegas, and the amount of improvement that he made in that game last week based on what they were able to see last year, I think it really, surprised them. And I think this is a player who you need to buy a lot of stock in, especially with Utah moving to the Big 12. We know there's a lot of points to be had in that conference. He's going to be able to take that program to the next level.
Sounds like with Isaac Wilson at quarterback, the only way you're going to beat Corner Canyon is by putting up 60-plus points. Because that man,
you're going to have to outscore him.
You're going to have to score.
You're not going to shut the kid out.
No.
You probably might not slow him down. Offensively, you're going to have to be able to match his energy.
Yeah, because he's got a lot of energy. All right, quite a few ranked matchups in week 1, which of course means that we saw some ranked wins for a handful of teams. So you have that high, right? How do you bring a team maybe down from that and say, hey, it's just week 1?
You got to move on immediately and turn the page. It's just 1 week of the football season. And all of these big-time teams have a goal of winning a state championship. Some of them have national championship aspirations. And so you can never let your highs be too high, Emily, or your lows be too low. You have to immediately turn the page, celebrate your win for one night. But now we have another game. And not every team is a national team. Some of these teams get knocked off by local teams over the course of the season, too. So football is a strange game, and one off night, it could ruin and derail all your dreams. So you need to really stay focused on the task at hand, 1 week at a time in the football season.
This is coming from someone who has experienced all the highs and the lows of a high school football season, so definitely listen up. All right, I'm not sure if you've seen, but there's the new documentary on Netflix right now, Swamp Kings, of course, talking about Florida and the Urban Meyer era. I'm not going to give you my review of it, but there was kind of an interesting nugget in there that made me think to ask you this. So Urban Meyer admitted that he hadn't heard the name Tim Tebow until somebody came up to him at an airport and said, hey, you should check out this guy. We know recruitments have some crazy twists and turns. Have you experienced anything like that, just not knowing who a potential program-changing player could be?
Well, that was probably hard news for some young guys out here. But what a time to be alive. That was back in the day, Emily, before we had Huddle, before we had 24/7, before recruiting was all over social media, and you had to do real recruiting based on relationships. And back then, players didn't have a Twitter profile. They had what we used to call a buzz. They would make big plays. They would grow up and be legendary. And somebody in your community would say, hey, this kid is really good. You need to check him out. I can remember growing up in St. Louis, we started to hear the buzz about Jeremy Macklin. Jeremy Macklin, my dad would call me, the guys from the neighborhood, the guys at the barbershop would say, you got to get down to Kirkwood and see this kid. He's special. He has a chance. And that's the way we talk. Jeremy Macklin ends up going and being an All-American at the University of Missouri and a first-round pick of the Philadelphia Eagles. That's when guys recruited based on relationships, based on high school coaches and who you knew. Now recruiting is much different. It's really just a transaction and a financial situation. But there were some guys in those days who were legendary recruiters, and they would find players and hear about them this way, and it could be program changing.
Crazy. Thank you for that perspective, Carl. We love to read between the lines, but thank goodness that there is a 24/7 Sports. There's also a 24/7 Sports YouTube channel. Make sure that you check it out. You're watching us right now, but go ahead and hit that subscribe button so you don't miss all the great commitments that we have, and of course, more great content from our friend Carl Reed. Well, just because there is no college football recruiting show over the weekend does not mean that the recruiting world stops. So it is time to mark your calendar. High school action continues. We got two massive games on the slate this weekend. First up, let's talk about number 2, Bishop Gorman taking on Long Beach Poly in a neutral site game for the Nike Kickoff Classic. Blair, who do you have your eye on in this one?
I want to know what Michigan running back commit Micah Kaapana will do for an encore. He had over 200 rushing yards in that win against Corner Canyon that helped offset what Isaac Wilson was doing. And this is going to be a battle within a battle, Emily, as Long Beach Poly's defense is spearheaded by 4-star linebacker and Oregon commit Dylan Williams. So it should be another fun matchup between two traditional powers.
And on Saturday afternoon, it's a Florida versus California matchup as number 3 St. John Bosco heads to the Sunshine State to take on 9th-ranked St. Thomas Aquinas. Our friend Steve Montoya of Max Preps called this the potential game of the year. What can we expect from this one?
A whole lot of star power, Emily. If you put both of these rosters together, you get nearly 30 total players in the 2024 class that will be playing Division I football next fall. And obviously in the 25 class, the 26 class, and the 27 are also loaded at both schools. California and Florida battles are usually entertaining, so I'm expecting a whole lot of trash talk from this one. And I might have to send Andrew Ivins a text message or two.
Looking forward to that. We obviously love high school action on the show, but come on. This is the college football recruiting show, and week 0 kicks off this weekend when Notre Dame takes on Navy in Dublin, Ireland. Hawaii goes to Nashville to face Vandy, and USC opens with San Jose State. A few more teams in action, but what are you most looking forward to as the season unofficially begins?
Emily, I was going to say I'm super excited, but I think I'm 80% excited and 20% anxious now. I'm just super stoked to dive into some of the recruiting storylines that will be emerging weekend to weekend. Surprise game visits, coaches spotted on the sidelines on Friday nights, trying to flip other prospects, the potential flips and the spatula that could be coming out, the effect on looming realignment and what that could have on the college football season and in recruiting. So a lot to dissect, and I'm excited because this is usually a part of the season where we say, oh, there's been no off season, right? We've been tracking all these recruiting storylines, but now that the games are here, it's going to be really interesting.
I'm just excited to see what we've been talking about all off season. Looking forward to it. Blair, I hope you have a 100% awesome weekend. We appreciate you coming back on the show. Thanks for joining us. Another reminder, hit that like button on the way out. Subscribe to the 24/7 Sports YouTube channel. For Blair Angulo, I'm Emily Proud, and this is the College Football Recruiting Show.